And since he's an auditor and he's running for office, we're going to give it to him. I'll ask you to welcome Tom Schweich, Missouri's auditor. Tom.
Go ahead and serve the stage, okay? Thank you, everybody. It's so good to see so many friends in the audience and so many people wearing the I Like Schweich sticker. By the way, those of you who aren't wearing it are going to get audited, so I go get one real quick, okay? Last time when I was up here, I told you about some of the changes we made to the office since I've been there. After 12 years of a Democrat rule, the office had pretty much fallen apart. So I put in citizen summaries, I put in a rapid response team that's uncovered a lot of fraud, I put in a grading system, and I put in an audit follow-up team, which I thought was very important because if people get a bad audit, we come back 90 days later and make sure that they fix the problems. My focus as auditor has been on, having a law enforcement background, has been first of all on embezzlement. We only audit government agencies and government entities, and when people are stealing your money, we need to find it. We have now found, since I've been auditor, 14 cases of public officials embezzling money for $2.1 million, and these people are going to jail. That's the first thing. The next thing I look for is fraud, not embezzlement, but other acts of fraud. We found one police chief who forged 500 traffic tickets. We found inflation of attendance in St. Louis City schools, and these people are now under investigation and have left their jobs. We don't want people committing fraud if they're in public office. The third thing I look for as an auditor is waste. We found $135 million of untracked Obama stimulus money. No one even knew what was happening to it, and we put accountability in there.
Yes.
And the last thing I look for is misrepresentation of success. You know, we have a lot of state representatives and state senators here, and they need to pass legislation with accurate information. And so, for example, when I audited a tax credit program recently, they said it was going to create 46,000 jobs. They were telling everybody it created 46,000 jobs. It created 7,000 jobs. And you need to know that when you're deciding whether to review it. So I look for situations where there's a misrepresentation of success. Those are my priorities as auditor, and I am thrilled with the job. I love it, and I hope you're happy with what we're doing. Here's my Marco Rubio moment. I have the water very handy. I had the honor of not running last time. I was one of the only statewide officials who didn't run, but I attended 50 events on behalf of other candidates. And I was on the ground. And I remember asking one of our party officials a couple of weeks before the election, how do you think we're going to do on the statewide offices? And he told me, I think our top of the ticket, which was Governor Romney at the time, is going to win by 10 points. And I just can't envision 300,000 or 400,000 voters switching and voting Democrat down ticket if we win by 10 points. And yet we ended up losing 5 out of 6 statewide races. And as a person who was the only statewide race up in 2014, I really don't want to see that repeated. Obviously, the party has problems at a national level. I know we're going to hear from some great speakers this weekend that will talk about some of our issues with demographics and attracting younger voters and Hispanics, and that's very important. What I thought I would do for just a couple of minutes, though, and if you attend some of the local Lincoln Days, I'll give the longer version of the speech, but some of my observations for having attended so many events as to what we need to do to make sure we win statewide in the future. And I don't mean this as any disrespect to any of our candidates who all worked very hard and did very well, but what I think we need to do if we want to win in 2014 and 2016 is, number one, I've learned that Missourians are willing to split their tickets and they vote based on perceived qualifications. It looks to me like they tend to vote for the people they think are best qualified for the job. So we have a great ideology, Republicans have great values, but I actually think when we advertise, when we talk, when we travel, we have to emphasize qualifications, because I really have found that that's what Missourians vote for, is that they think they're the best qualified candidate. I think that when candidates are deciding whether to run, we have to look at what their weaknesses are as candidates. For example, when I ran, I'm not an accountant. And we knew that was a big weakness running for auditor, because a lot of people think an auditor should be an accountant. So what we did was we polled and we said, well, can you overcome the fact that you're not an accountant to be an auditor? And the answer was yes, because I have a law enforcement background, and law enforcement always trumped accounting in every poll. So if candidates have perceived weaknesses, we need to talk about what those weaknesses are and make sure that they understand them. And if they're not able to be overcome, our party leaders need to say, look, we don't think you can overcome those weaknesses. We need to have candidates that campaign very effectively, that speak articulately, that inspire people, that get the crowds excited. We need to look for people who campaign effectively. People need to be in the right race. A lot of times there's overreach. You know, I was actually approached, some of you remember this, in 2010 to run for U.S. Senate. I had been an ambassador and a prosecutor and worked at the UN under John Bolton and Jack Danforth and had a good resume, but that wasn't the right race for someone running for the first time. It was overreach. So I ran for auditor. So let's make sure our candidates are actually running in the right race. We have a situation with self-funders. A lot of people come in, they put a lot of their own money into the race, and I think that's great. But I've talked to some self-funders. 80% of the self-funders across the country lost this time around. And that's because when party leaders hear about a self-funder, they think, well, they have money, we don't need to do anything. Our self-funders need the same kind of support from our party, the same kind of advice as everybody else. We can't just say they got money so they can go ahead and retire. We've got to make sure self-funders have the same support. Consultants. There's been a lot of consultant bashing since this last election cycle. I want to tell you, I've worked with our consultants and I like our consultants. If you want a picture of a race very quickly, Jeff Rowe is the best person in the world to do that. David Bartlett is very controversial. Some people call him the Prince of Darkness, but he has the best sense of timing of any person I've ever dealt with. So I like consultants. James Harris keeps the trains running on time. He's a turnkey operation. The only problem with consultants that I found is when they basically try to recruit people to run against other people, when they try to generate primaries, when they put money up ahead of winning. And I think we can work with our consultants and prevent that going forward. I think it's very important to recognize consultants provide a valuable service, but I've had one consultant come to me and say, I can protect you against another consultant. It was almost like some mob thing, you know? That's not what consultants should be doing. Next, the grassroots. I think we ignored the grassroots in the last election, and we have to recognize our grassroots leaders are what get people elected. I know, for example, I was talking to Chris Howard, one of our grassroots leaders, and he told me that he compared the number of people that took a Republican ballot in a particular township versus the number of people who we had contact with, and we had voter contact with 17% of the people. The Democrats cleaned our clock with the grassroots. We have got to recognize that these are the people that work hard and get out the votes. And the last thing I want to say, and I hope I don't offend anybody here, is to talk about our factionalism as a party. I'm going to focus on 4 phrases that I hear all the time on the campaign trail. And 2 of the phrases are used by our moderates against conservatives. 2 of the phrases are used by conservatives against moderates. And I'm going to ask, probably without success, that we stop using those words. The first thing I hear all the time is people railing against the establishment. Do you know what the establishment is? The establishment, as far as I can tell, is everybody not voting for you. As soon as they don't want you, they become the establishment. I had one of our candidates ask me to be introduced to some of my donors and friends, and I did that, and they decided not to support that candidate, and he immediately lashed out against them as part of the establishment. It seemed like hypocrisy to me. I think it's very important to recognize that if we mean by establishment wealthy people, we better not bite the hand that feeds us. The establishment for these wealthy people are the people that fund our campaigns, and I don't think we ought to be criticizing them. Some of them have been very alienated. I know that. They've told me that. So let's recognize these are valuable people. Another phrase I don't like is rhino. Republican in name only. I've been accused of that. I don't know who the cabal is that sits in judgment and looks down at other people and decides who's a Republican and who's not a Republican. But I want to tell you something. If somebody says they want to be a Republican, we ought to invite them here. We ought to embrace them, and they're Republicans. I don't want to hear the word rhino anymore. All it does is give the liberal media a way to divide us. It does not solve anything. Now let's talk about some of the phrases the moderates use against the conservatives. The most popular phrase now, right-wing wacko. I had somebody tell me recently that somebody is a right-wing wacko and I'm not going to support them. Do you know what right-wing wacko is code word for? Christian conservatives. There are people that don't like people who use their Christianity to inform their voting. Well, I don't have to remind them. If you've all looked at Lincoln's second inaugural address, which was 800 words long, very, very short, it mentioned God 14 times, okay? God is a part of the Republican Party, whether you like it or not. So I don't want to hear people referred to as right-wing wackos. And the last phrase I hope we can get rid of in our party is Tea Party crazy. That's another one I've heard. They're crazies. They're Tea Party crazies. And sometimes they substitute Ron Paul crazies. I don't have to remind you all that the focus on the national debt, on the erosion of our states' rights, on the fact that we have an overbearing government that was all brought to the forefront by Tea Party people and Ron Paul people, and we need to embrace those people in our parliament. Every person in this room is better for America than Barack Obama. Is better for Missouri than Jay Nixon. We need to unite around highly qualified, competent candidates, recognize their values, support them with the grassroots, and if we do that, I'll hopefully win in 2014 and we'll have a clean sweep in 2016. Thank you very much.